Good evening, everybody. It is Saturday night in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Post-Gazette sports columnist Paul Zeise after a 1917 Steelers loss to the Bengals at Acrisure Stadium in the final game of the season. Paul, I had a sermon written up about how these guys played like losers tonight. They looked like losers. Then they come back in the final minutes, make it interesting. But then they have that final drive where everything I was prepared to say felt apt again. What are your thoughts on what we saw transpire tonight?
Disgrace. Absolute disgrace. I don't think there's any other way to say it, is there? I mean, at the end of the day, you had a Bengals team that basically had their quarterback and one receiver. I guess if you want to say their tight end, they both of their tackles are banged up. I mean, their running back was out. T. Higgins was pretty much useless almost the entire game. I mean, how do you lose at home to a team that basically was left for the dead 5-6 weeks ago, right? And you know that you have to win in order to get a better matchup, right? In order to go to Houston as opposed to Baltimore. It's a disgraceful loss, horrific. There's no, and listen, I get it. I appreciate the fact that there are still a number of Mike Tomlin, fanboys in town, some even in the media. And I get it, the culture and all this other crap, you know what I'm saying? But anybody that's trying to spin the fact that the defense played some great game in this game is out of their minds. You had a quarterback play by himself, basically, with one receiver. The only guy you needed to stop because everybody else was basically hurt for that team. And quite frankly, right, if Chase drops a ball that he catches 100 times out of 100, or this game is over even earlier than it is. So I don't want to hear about all of the ways that we're going to try and worm our way into saying the Steelers did something good in this game. They did not. There's not a single redeeming quality. You're wrong. Chris Boswell is still a redeeming quality that we can talk about. Everything else about this game, from the game plan, from the coaching, which, by the way, they had, 10 or 11 days to get ready for this game or whatever it is, right? From the coaching, from the game planning, from the execution, from the offense, from the quarterback, from whatever way you want to look at it, okay? You essentially played a team that had one player who was healthy on offense. Two, okay, Joe Burrow, but you get my point. There was only one guy you had to worry about trying to stop. And quite frankly, you know what? You lost a game to this team with everything at stake. You should be embarrassed, if you ask me. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great summation at the top. We're going to get into the details here. Russell Wilson, the running game, some of the calls to go for it on fourth down early in the game. Around halftime, some of the calls that Arthur Smith made late in the game, I thought this was easily his worst game as the Steelers offensive coordinator. Some of the stuff they were trying to do with Cordero Patterson on the most important drive of the game was disastrous. But we're going to dig into all that. Before we do, just want to slip in our quick read here for Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, let's start with Russ. I made the stats respectable, I guess, by the end of the game. Still only passes for 148 yards, takes the 4 sacks, passer rating of 78.4. I don't know what he's doing for this offense right now beyond the deep ball. So he can throw that deep ball as well as anyone in the NFL today, as anyone as well as Ben Roethlisberger threw it for chunks of his career. But Paul, there's nothing between that and the checkdowns right now in this offense.
No, there isn't. And here's the other thing. Well, you're going to ask me about George Pickens in a little bit, right?
Absolutely. He's on the list.
Okay. So let's start. Yeah. We'll start with Russell then. We'll start with Russell Wilson. Because believe me, I forgot to go off about that. But we'll get to that. Russell Wilson. Okay. Here we go. Something has happened in the last 3 weeks where he's turned into Denver Russell Wilson. for about 6 weeks, it looked like the Steelers had Seattle Russell Wilson. And we were talking about $40 million, $30 million, right? Two-year deal for $60, $80 million. That's what we were talking about, wasn't it? In the last 3 weeks or 2 weeks, I would say the last two, or at least the last 2 weeks, he's turned into something different. And it's so true. There's nothing between chucking it up in the air and throwing those little routes to Freiermuth. You know what I mean? Which, I mean, we'll get to him too, but I didn't think he played a particularly good game either. Starting with the insult at the end there where he dropped the ball. But my point is, Russell Wilson has to play a hell of a lot better if they're going to go down to Baltimore and win. And again, I mean, like, we've seen different things happen in the NFL. I get it. Lamar Jackson is playoff Lamar, so maybe they'll get him. But at the end of the day, is there anybody that believes this team, with Russell Wilson right now playing the way he's playing, is going to go to Baltimore next week and play and win? This offense is so predictable, so easy to stop. But the reality of the situation is they've got to do a much better job of getting Russell Wilson loose so he can actually make plays that he's capable of making. I just think it's a complete meltdown, starting with the guy calling the plays.
Well, and I'll say this about Russ is, I mean, isn't the selling point is the behind this inexperienced offensive line that he's supposed to know where the ball's supposed to go. And I don't see that guy right now. I see him. Honestly, he did not look a whole lot different than early season Justin Fields tonight, Paul, including on that final drive where he's tucking and running for 3 yards with 30 seconds left in the game. I mean, that was something I would expect Justin Fields to do. It feels like he's seeing ghosts. He's tucking and running. He doesn't really seem to be seeing the field very well at all. And if he's not, the only thing you're really getting at from him is the deep ball. And that's, man, he's just not living up to the things he's supposed to be doing well in these moments.
And you bring up a good point that I completely, forgot about, right? Talking about Russell Wilson. On that last drive when you have basically no timeouts, well, actually they had one, but they blew it. They had to use it because of, right? You throw a check down underneath, I think actually lost 2 yards, right? And you get tackled and you lose 25, 30 seconds there. Then you try and run. And instead of just saying, okay, I got my 2 or 3 yards, let me get out of bounds and stop the clock, he tries to lower his head or whatever he did, and he gets tackled inbounds and wastes another 30 seconds. I mean, they literally wasted about a minute 10 seconds on 2 plays and then they had to use their timeout because they just I don't get what they're doing. But whatever they were doing tonight was not working.
No, and listen, you bring Russell Wilson in not to make those plays, Paul. And the fact that he did it has to make you question what his future is here. Let's get to George Pickens because the comments are lighting up. We also have some questions about the toss plays that they're apparently a staple feature of this offense, whether they work or not. Let's start with Pickens, Paul. What is going on there? He's yelling at fans in the stands who are booing, given what this offense was doing. I think justifiably so. He's dropping passes. He was just not in the right spot on that route. He was open, but he didn't adjust to the ball well. I mean, a disastrous game from him. And if you're talking about a second contract for him with the Steelers, it's getting into some dicey territory as well, despite the obvious talent.
I mean, is it just me, Adam, or did he look like a guy who didn't want to be there tonight? He looked like a guy who was mentally just not there. He just didn't care. Did not care even a little bit, whether or not the Steelers won this game or not. I mean, you want to talk about, hey, he's a freak of nature and does a lot of things great and has all these talents. I get all that, and I'm okay with, he does have talent. But you know what? What he did tonight, and I'm not going to say it because he's still relatively a young player, what he did tonight was losing football. That's a losing football player in my mind. Okay, a winning football player makes the catches. The one catch down the sidelines, he makes that in his sleep, and he dropped it. Then he had the catch, right over the middle. Okay, the Bengal guy made a pretty good play, but those are the kind of plays that Pickens has made, where he catches the ball, those tough combat catches, right? Then he makes a bad adjustment, like you said, on a play that should have been a touchdown, right? I mean, I don't understand what he was doing tonight. It looked to me like a guy who did not care. And I'm not going to say he didn't, because I don't know what's in his heart. But if I'm a coach watching that film, I'm saying this is a guy right here who I don't think is a winning football player. And if he is, then he's going to have to show us next week against the Ravens. Because to your point, he becomes a guy that you think about, maybe we have to trade this guy, get him out of our locker room because he's not helping our culture. I don't think you're there yet, but after a game like that, it makes you wonder.
Well, he's not the only one, Paul. I mean, so you're right. Losing football player. I'll just simplify the word loser. He played like a loser tonight, and lots of these guys played like losers tonight in critical moments. And this was the type of loss, Paul, that I think makes you question the entire construction of this team, of this franchise. Whether this group of players that you've assembled, despite some all-time greats in T.J. Watt, Cam Heyward, Russell Wilson at the end of a great career, there's just not enough guys like that on this team that even with the play with the intensity of those guys, not everyone's going to be as talented as TJ Watt or Cam Heyward, but there's just, I didn't see the intensity from lots of guys beyond George Pickens, to be completely fair to him. Paul, I also want to talk about this running game. Troy Aikman was pretty insightful. I thought made the comment of, very bluntly, that this team doesn't run the ball well. It just runs it with a volume. I think we saw that again tonight. They weren't particularly efficient. Najee Harris finishes with 36 yards on 12 carries. That's an average of 3 per carry. Jaylen Warren had the 3.5 yards per carry, 6 on 21. Are they clinging to an identity that they've just never had for the entire season, Paul?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that was the whole view. We're going to bring Arthur Smith in and all of his run schemes and everything else, and he's going to pound the rock, and we're going to be a team that controls the clock. I mean, Adam, they were out time of possession. At one point, it was like 38-17 time of possession or something like that, wasn't it? I mean, at one point, I think they made it a little closer than that. But the bottom line is, you can't possess the ball if you can't run the ball. And their running game, to me, has been always very overrated this year, at least the last 3 or 4 weeks especially, because at the end of the day, they can't run when they absolutely need to run. I mean, we haven't even gotten into the nonsensical 3rd and inches, 4th and inches, that basically gave up 3 points for no reason, right? If you're a team that can run the football, you don't. You get that first down on 3rd down, not 4th down. You don't forget about 4th down, right? But that was kind of the way the game was playing out. I think that there's a couple things. A couple of their tackles are just not good enough. I mean, I'm ready to say the tackles are just not good enough. Period. And then number one, and number two, I don't think Najee Harris is good enough. And, Cordarrelle Patterson is clearly not good enough. Jaylen Warren at times seems to be good enough. At other times seems to be a guy who's an undrafted free agent. So to me, this was supposed to be what this team does really well. They were supposed to be a team that, that runs the ball with authority, downhill, all that good stuff. And it's just not. And so, yes, Troy Aikman is correct. That's something that they have to fix in the offseason, but it's not going to be that easy, Adam, because it's going to require more than just one player or 2 players, I think. And you got to go get a running back, and you got to, God forbid, they might have to draft another offensive lineman. I just don't know. I will say this. If Arthur Smith gets a second year, there's something wrong. Okay, they brought him in. I get it. I understand. They brought him in. You know what? It was Matt Canada's fault. Then it was the quarterback's fault. Then it was the offensive line's fault. Now, sooner or later, I got to be honest with you. I'm watching Arthur Smith's offense, and I'm saying it's just not that imaginative. It's pretty bad when I'm sitting here, watching the TV, and I'm not in meetings all week, and I can tell you probably 70% of the plays, what's coming. That's bad.
Well, speaking of what's coming, what was it? The first play of the second half. You have the toss play that loses 4 yards. You have the same toss play on what was it with Cordarrelle Patterson on that penultimate drive. How many times a game do we see that? And we keep hearing, oh, it sets up X, Y, and Z. I don't see what it's setting up, Paul. And I just see a play that they're running 5-6 times a game that has not worked with any consistency for the entire season.
What was the game where they ran a couple of tosses and they got like 10 yards each, and people were like, you see, they've been setting that up all year. It was a couple of games ago. I mean, at the end of the day, the toss play is now become the new jet sweep, hasn't it?
I was about to say the exact same thing, Paul.
It's time to get rid of that play out of the playbook. Get it out of here.
Paul, we got to get into that. You mentioned I don't even know what to call what happened at the end of the half, where you can't get the 1 yard on those 2 consecutive plays. You go for it on 4th down in your own territory. You set up the Bengals to get an easy 3 points with like 30 seconds left. And it just seems like he's chasing points. I mean, is there any other thing other to call it than you're just making desperate calls that a winning? He said he justified it in the interview on the sideline as saying, well, if we can't get that 1 yard, we don't deserve to win the game. I would play the other way around. If this offense didn't deserve to go for that 4th down with the way it was playing, I don't know where you get the confidence to believe that you can convert that 1 yard and that's suddenly going to spark you. They weren't playing like a unit that deserved the chance to try to win the game on that play. You got a whole half to go, and in the end, Paul, those 3 points are what lost them the game.
And here's the thing, okay? Here's the other thing. That's that whole, if we can't get a yard, we don't deserve to win. No, you don't deserve to win because you're stupid. That's why you don't deserve to win, not because you couldn't get a yard. Because if you punt there, you save you save 3 points. But these coaches that they don't ever think about that kind of stuff. He got caught up in the emotions of it. He was upset because the Russell Wilson play was overturned or whatever. It looked like he got it at first, but he didn't get it. And it was like an emotional decision. It wasn't a decision of saying like, here's the thing. He's very lucky this wasn't the winner goes in and the loser stays home kind of game, right? Because that would have been a real disaster. At the end of the day, you've got to make sure that you understand if you don't get it, you're giving the Bengals 3 points. And in this game, in this kind of game, 3 points, obviously, I don't know, Adam, I'm not the best at math, but I think 3 points were pretty significant in the end of this game, weren't they?
Yeah, decided the game, Paul. I know you wanted to talk about Pat Freiermuth. He finishes with 8 catches for 85 yards. Look, he had some key drops too. I wouldn't call it his best game. I will say this, Paul. I'm not sure any other receiver not named George Pickens or Calvin Austin should even be in the conversation to be on this team next season. I think the best you can say for Freiermuth is he did step up when those guys were completely invisible. I mean, let's look at this. Mike Williams gets the one big catch on his one target for 25 yards. Van Jefferson somehow had 3 for 8. Calvin Austin, no catches. George Pickens had the 1 catch on 6 targets. These guys were basically invisible. So I mean, do you give Freiermuth any credit for that?
Yeah, I like Freiermuth. I think he's a good player. What I'm talking about though is a couple of times he went out short of the first down and it cost him. And then he had that drop at the end, and then there was another drop that I thought he should have caught. But overall, I like Pratt. I think he's a good player. I just didn't think he had a great game tonight. I thought but to your point, I mean, he's Travis Kelce in his prime compared to the other guys on this team that are supposed to be catching the ball. I mean, seriously, we've been talking about it for a year, Adam. Literally. Probably a year, haven't we? At least. We've been talking about it for a year.
We've been talking about it for 2 years, Paul. On the show you and I used to do on Thursdays, we say every week, have you done enough at receiver? And they go out and they find another guy Williams has made some great catches, but he's not consistently a part of this offense. And I guess that's what you get for settling for a guy that you can get for a 5th round pick. Paul, we're going to get into the defense. So if you're angry at all at the defense, please stay tuned because I think Paul and I have a fair amount of things to say about them. Before we do, just want to thank another couple of sponsors. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky & White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. Also want to thank Archie's. The game is always on at Archie's on Carson, Pittsburgh's best place for food, drinks, and sports. Open Sundays for the game, 12 p.m. to 2 a.m. Be sure to check out their daily drink specials and stop in for 80-cent wing nights Monday through Thursday. Tell them Paul Zeise sent you. Paul, defensive side, I mean, flat out, these guys were open for Cincinnati. Just wide open, wide bleeping open to borrow DeShon Elliott's, phrase from last week after, in the loss to the Chiefs. Burrow was getting the ball out very fast. I think it was an average of 2 seconds they said on that first drive. I think you sped them up a little bit later on, but there was just too many passes that were just too easy for a guy of Joe Burrow's caliber, regardless of the pass rush and regardless of, I'm going to talk about him in a second here, Minkah Fitzpatrick in the middle of the field.
Yeah, I mean, and there was too many third downs where they made plays that you're like, what are the Steelers doing? Where guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Patrick Queen, or guys missed tackles short of the sticks, and they got first downs. I thought the defense played. I thought, considering what they were playing against, which is essentially a guy with one receiver, I thought it was not a good effort by the Steelers defense, especially when you consider that the Steelers defense is supposed to be their bread and butter. The elite stars. And last time I checked, I think all of their stars played, correct? Minkah played. Joey Porter Jr. played. Patrick Queen played.
Dante Jackson was the only big absence tonight.
That's what I mean. They basically had all of their guys. And again, I know that there are people that want to try and somehow, convolutedly try and make it out to be, they held the Bengals to 19 points. Well, first of all, the Bengals did a pretty good job of holding themselves to 19 points, number one. And number two, again, this is a crippled version of the Bengals. As an aside, I will say this. If I'm Buffalo, I'm rooting for the Broncos or the Dolphins tomorrow to win, because I don't know that I want to see, especially if Chase Brown's coming back and Higgins is healthy. I don't know that I want to see these guys. This is the kind of team that they're not good, but they're dangerous. And so, but the Steelers didn't even get that version of the Bengals. They got a version of the Bengals that was just basically a crippled version, and they somehow still found a way to lose.
Well, let's talk about the decision that when Higgins was in there, Corey Trice was the guy guarding Jamar Chase. Troy Aikman again brought that up on the broadcast. That's something they like to do against the Bengals, is use their number 2 corner. Corey Trice is not a number 2 corner, Paul. I'm not sure he's a number 3 or a 4. He is a depth guy. And listen, I understand why they're optimistic about him, but the fact is he is a 7th round pick that has barely played any football in the NFL, given his injuries these last couple of years. To me, that was negligence to match him up in a game of this magnitude against a guy of that caliber.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I don't understand why did that happen?
Because I guess they want Porter on T. Higgins.
Again, this is the defensive genius, isn't it? Look, you and I have been harping on this as well, right? They didn't do a good job of dealing with the depth in the secondary. They did not do a good job of dealing with that. And as a result, we're here. There's no other way to say it. We can sit here and try and mince words and try and, But the reality is they've got Joey Porter Jr. And if they have any amount of injuries, which in this case is Dante Jackson, who, let's face it, isn't exactly like, Mel Blount being knocked out of the game. You're talking about Dante Jackson, but he is Mel Blount compared to whoever is going to be second or third or whatever. And, I know there are people that get excited because Beanie Bishop had another interception. What's that, about 5 or 6 for him? I've never seen a guy where the ball bounces to him more than this guy. But outside of the ball bouncing to him, he's not really all that useful. Nor is Corey Trice. Nor is, this is a problem they have. When we look at this offseason coming, in retrospect, It's not hindsight being 2020 for us to say they didn't address the second receiver spot well, and they didn't address depth in the secondary very well at the corner position. And quite frankly, I mean, if you look at those two positions, those are two positions that are probably going to be the reason this team goes home next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see people, sticking up for Trice in the comments. I'm not trying to roast the guy. I don't blame him for the way he's playing against one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the NFL. I blame the situations that he's put in, given his experience level, and some of the stuff's not his fault. But that doesn't mean that you can't blame him for being in that situation, or you can't blame someone for him being in that situation in the first place. Paul, I also want to talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick and having $20 million in him to frequently. When Burrow's getting the ball out, he's just not in the play. I mean, there's these quick passes. Every replay, you see Minkah Fitzpatrick standing in the middle of the field, and I don't know what the value of a guy who takes away half the field is if you're getting destroyed in the other half of the field because your personnel is just not good enough, arguably because you're not distributing that money across multiple guys because you got it all invested in one safety.
Yeah. No. And I thought the Minkah Fitzpatrick play that stands out to me is like I said, where it was 3rd and something, maybe on about the 25-yard line or 20-something yard line. They rushed. Patrick Queen missed the sack. Joe Burrow kind of did like a little jump pass to someone right in front of him. The guy caught it, turned. Minkah Fitzpatrick is there to make a tackle and, force a field goal or whatever. And, of course, he misses a tackle. The guy gets the first down. Now, it ended up, I don't think they got a touchdown out of it anyway. But at the end of the day, that's a play you're supposed to make. And he just hasn't made that many plays like that this year.
Paul, let's go a little bit big picture here. Obviously, Baltimore and the Texans are still on the board as a possibility for the Steelers to go there next week. The Chargers are playing a dysfunctional Las Vegas Raiders team. If they're able to win that game, they will get the 5th seed, and the Steelers will head to Baltimore. So I'd say a pretty limited chance for the Steelers, Paul, to end up facing the Texans. But nonetheless, we're all talking about the Texans like a struggling team, and they looked arguably worse than the Steelers did last week against the Chiefs with their 2 points against the Ravens on Christmas Day. Still, Paul, I got to think if you're the Texans, the Steelers are the team you want to see.
Yeah, you probably don't want to see the Chargers, that's for sure. And just because I think the Chargers are, playing better than the Steelers are, I got to be honest with you. I hope the Chargers win tomorrow. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is the Steelers go to Houston and then slop together some, god-awful, typical Mike Tomlin, recent playoff win, which we haven't seen him recently, but, sort of like the Chiefs game when they beat the, Alex Smith, what was it, 18-16 or some crap like that. And then they win. And, of course, this is a team that needs an overhaul. And I would say, and I know that this is probably not what some people want to hear, but if you ask me, I personally, and you can read all about this tomorrow in the Post-Gazette, I personally think that Mike Tomlin should be coaching for his job next week, no matter where it's at. I don't care if it's in Houston. I don't care if it's in Baltimore. I don't care if it's in Baltimore and T.J. Watt, Cam Heyward, and George Pickens all developed the flu on Friday. I don't care. He should be coaching for his job next week. He won't be, but at some point you have to say this isn't getting them where they need to go anymore. We can talk about the quarterback. We can talk about this. We can talk about the offensive coordinators. He's the guy that's doing the hiring. I mean, at the end of the day, they have changed coordinators. They've changed coordinators on both sides of the ball multiple times. They've changed quarterbacks multiple times. They've changed general managers. There's one constant. What is it?
Well, and let me ask the question this way, Paul, because I tend to agree with you that whether he should be on the hot seat or not, he's not going to be because that's the organizational philosophy. But I mean, how much is the Steelers core and the concept of them being having the ability to win something meaningful on trial next week? Because to me, I look at the situation and say you've done practically everything you can to get these guys over the finish line, and bar 2020, you cannot get past this 10-7 threshold, seemingly no matter what you do. How long can you justify keeping this core together if you lose next week?
Well,
and,
I mean,
I
think
lose in the first round, but having lost all of these games to end the regular season.
Well, like I said, I think I talked about it yesterday with to me, when you talk about trading some of this core, I mean, the problem is the value. The only guy you're maybe going to get value for is TJ Watt at this point. I mean, Minkah with that contract, who's trading for him and giving you anything of real value? Cam Heyward, I love the guy. He's got great heart. He's still a very good player, but he's old. I mean, who's really going to give you what are you going to get for him? And so I look at it and you talk about breaking up this core a little bit. I just don't know how you do that. I mean, to me, I think you have to overhaul some things, and you probably have to go out and have a really good offseason in terms of who you sign and who you bring here, and a good draft, of course. But for better or worse, you're stuck because of the contracts you've handed out to these guys. You're stuck with a lot of these guys. And I would say this, you look at the defense, and you have to ask yourself, is it the most overpriced unit in football?
Yeah,
seems like a very fair question to me.
Well, but I think the question for me, Paul, is you just have to eat some money to get some guys out of here.
Yeah,
I mean that's the way I look at it. They talk about it with quarterbacks all the time. Do you just have to eat some money on the short term to move on from Minkah Fitzpatrick because he's not worth to you currently what you're paying him, regardless of whether he's still a good player for someone else in some other situation. Paul, any final thoughts here? Any thoughts on the possible game in Ireland next season?
I mean, right about now, I think everybody's ready to send the Steelers to Ireland, aren't they? No, I mean, I think eventually you knew the Steelers were going to be one of the teams that got sent there. I mean, they seem to send Jacksonville there about 7 times a year. But the bottom line is it'll be cool, too, because it'll be a little bit of a tribute for Dan Rooney and all that other stuff. But to me, I think that next week's game is really going to be, I think, a very important game for Mike Tomlin. And here's the thing. It could be a thing of where they lose and he just decides to do one of those, I'm going to retire right now. And then, of course, a year from now he comes back. I honestly believe that it could be sort of one of those times where if they don't win, it could be sort of a mutual decision to part ways type thing.
A pivot point, possibly in Steelers history, because it just feels like you're on a bus to nowhere right now, Paul. I agree. Everyone else, thank you for joining us tonight. We had a huge audience tonight, Paul, biggest of the season by far. So thank you for joining us late. We're going to still have a lot more here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Jerry Dulac, Ray Fittipaldi will have their video from Acrisure Stadium. I believe Christopher Carter's cooking something up for a special Sunday video because of the game on Saturday. Then we obviously have the North Shore Drive Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Paul, you got your daily shows too this week, getting you ready for whoever the Steelers play in the playoffs.
Well, we'll talk. All of you that are here, we'll talk on Monday about the playoff game and beyond.
Yep. So if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, pop the like button, help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that, and we will talk to you all again real soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.